In question 6a, we're told to shade 6 more squares so that the grid has rotational symmetry and no line symmetry. And we're given a grid to practice on and a grid to answer on. So rotational symmetry means if you turn the shape round, if you rotate it, there should be a point at which it looks the same before it gets back to the beginning. And if it's got line symmetry, that means you should be able to put a mirror on it and it looks the same either side of the mirror. So in any question with rotational symmetry, you should always ask for a piece of tracing paper. And so if I put my tracing paper over the top and I shade what already exists on it, so I shade in these 2 squares, if I was then to rotate this round, it should look the same at some point if it's got rotational symmetry. So if I rotate round what I currently have here, notice how if I get to this point, the shape no longer looks the same. I've got these 2 squares up here aren't coloured in on my tracing paper, and they are coloured in down here. So what I will do, I rotate it round 180 degrees, and now I will colour in the squares that should be coloured in. So I'll colour in these 2 squares here. And notice now that if I rotate this round, it looks the same if I rotate it 180 degrees. So now it does have rotational symmetry, and also it doesn't have any line symmetry. But we haven't shaded in 6 squares, so we need to shade in some more squares. Now you need to be careful about how you do it, because you need to make sure you keep the rotational symmetry, but also you must make sure that it doesn't have line symmetry once you've added in the extra 4 squares that we need. So for example, you would have problems. You might think, well, if I shade in 1, 2, 3, 4, if I rotated that round, clearly it would still be the same, but we've got a line of symmetry now across the middle, so that wouldn't work. So this is why you're given a practice grid, and you should always use pencil when you're drawing these diagrams, because you can try something, and if it doesn't work, you can try something else. So there are lots of possible answers. One possible answer, I could shade this one in, and then I'll rotate round to see where the other one would have to be. So doing that, I need to shade in an extra square at the top here, this one. And then I might pick another square, say this one here, and we'll see where that will need to be when we rotate it round. So remember, this is the new square we've added. So that will need to be filled in here as well. And so now we have a shape that should hopefully have rotational symmetry, but won't have any line symmetry. Make sure you check what you've done. So if I rotate this round 180 degrees, it should look the same now. And in fact, it does. And so all we need to do is draw this onto our new practice grid down here. And so I'll take the tracing paper and just move it to one side, and I'm going to copy and make sure I've got all of these squares coloured in. And there we have a shape with 6 squares coloured in, rotational symmetry but no line symmetry. In part B it says, here is a pattern of squares, some of the squares are shaded. Work out the fraction of the whole pattern that is shaded. If we want to work out a fraction that's shaded, what would be useful is if the whole big square was divided up into squares of equal size. So I'm going to add some extra lines in so that that's the case. And so if we now look at the diagram, we have 16 squares, of which 6 are shaded. And so the shaded fraction is going to be 6 out of 16, which we can cancel down by dividing by 2 to 3/8.